Hey, what is happening, guys? This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Welcome back to the channel. Today what I want to do is discuss a little bit of the next generation, which feels like it's looming just ahead of us, and also a little bit of how Nintendo and the Switch specifically fit into that. So I must say, I was not actually intending to make a video today. I didn't think I was going to have time, let alone time to do it with myself on camera, which, as I've said before, does take a little bit more time to kind of get ready and prepared, and also to edit. But luckily, as fortunes would have it, things kind of freed up, and it turned out that I had time to make a video, which is good because I've had this topic on my brain for a couple of days now, and I thought that it would be fun and interesting to discuss with you guys, kind of see how you all feel about it, and just kind of do what I normally do with the videos on Rule of Two Review and just get my thoughts out to you. So, like I said, what I want to do is discuss the next generation, basically the next round of consoles that we might be seeing sometime in the next couple of years. Now, I know in a lot of ways it's kind of silly and ridiculous to maybe be talking about this because we're only 4.5 years, I guess almost 5 years, into the PS4 and Xbox One, which is both a significant amount of time, but also not nearly as long as prior consoles and generations sometimes have been. And then, of course, we're only 1.5 years into the Nintendo Switch's life. And that does kind of muddy the waters a little bit, and I even discussed a kind of similar topic about 2 or 3 months ago, where I discussed whether or not Nintendo specifically started the next generation with the Nintendo Switch or not, and kind of how I was breaking down the nature of the gaming landscape now based on what consoles exist. Nintendo comes out in 2017, but the other 8th gen consoles are still going, and we can probably expect maybe a full round from all three within the next 4 or 5 years. And so anyway, that conversation is its own. I highly recommend you check it out. It was a lot of fun. I might hit a couple of similar beats here, but it was sort of where that conversation led as I had it. That kind of became the jumping off point, and then a couple of other podcasts and videos I've listened to recently that started to make me realize there might be a lot more movement and traction going on with the next-gen hardware behind the scenes that a lot of us realize. Recent conversations from Sony and from Microsoft about the next hardware that we know that they're making. Some recent conversations for like the 12th time have popped up about Nintendo releasing like an upgraded or revised version of the Nintendo Switch. Also have us thinking about new hardware from Nintendo, let alone do they want to make a successor to the 3DS. All of this stuff, it's just really crazy. I mean, essentially with some of the recent conversation going on during E3 and since E3 only a few weeks ago, it's just gotten to the point where it's like I can't stop thinking about this, and it's interesting, man. Like, next-gen hardware is kind of already happening. This conversation is going on right now. One of the key elements, specifically regarding E3, of course, is the fact that Microsoft and Phil Spencer on stage during their conference discussed future hardware from Microsoft. More Xboxes to come. They basically, as I said in my E3 video for Microsoft, they doubled down on the Xbox brand as opposed to abandoning it and walking away from the home console front outright, which I kind of suspected that maybe they were going to do. Instead, they're like, nope, we're rolling the dice, man. We're committed to this. We like what we're doing. We believe that there is a further future for the Xbox brand. We think that it matters. And we bought a whole bunch of studios. We made our own brand new studio. And obviously those studios are designing games and software for the next Xbox without question. And then, of course, even at the end, Phil Spencer says, and, you know, Microsoft is committed with all of our resources to making sure the Xbox brand and future Xbox consoles, plural, continue to go on. I paraphrased that like crazy, but clearly that's the essence of what he was saying at the end of his conference there. And then the following day is when he started talking about the Xbox Project Scarlet, whatever we want to call that. So there really isn't a whole lot known about the Scarlet. It's literally just the current code name that Phil Spencer blabbed out in an interview for the next hardware that we know Microsoft is working on. Essentially the next Xbox to succeed the Xbox One and Xbox One X. And that's pretty crazy. I mean, I think the one thing I read in doing quick research is that it's suspected to use similar architecture to the Xbox One, which is fine. That doesn't mean anything to me because I'm not a tech head, you guys know. But it was interesting to kind of hear it's going to sort of continue the line of what they've been doing the last couple of years with the Xbox One. So suddenly we've got a code name for what seems to be the next Xbox. I wanted to believe in the last couple of years that Project Scorpio was going to maybe be Microsoft's attempt to sort of bridge the gap between the current generation and the next generation and be their long-term version of the Xbox. And this Scarlet thing pretty much seems to disprove that. They're obviously working on a successor to the Xbox One and One X with the Scarlet. Now, a few weeks before that, of course, was a conversation from Sony discussing the fact that they're in the, quote, final phase of the PlayStation 4's life, which was a little bit of a misnomer, and they had to clarify, and they basically said, hey, like, we're still doing PS4 stuff. This is for, like, 2 or 3 years down the road. Don't everyone get, you know, crazy about it. And I was like, okay, well, you probably should have thought about that headline before you started blurting this out. But maybe that was what they wanted. Maybe they wanted people to start conversations like that. So that, coupled with even rumors from a year before that, where people were starting to talk about the PS5, and apparently PS5 dev kits have been going out, all sorts of crazy stuff. And so we've got the Xbox Scarlet, we've got the PlayStation 5. There's rumors and rumblings and motion behind the scenes on hardware from Microsoft and Sony right now for some time soon. And like I said, there was a recent conversation that cropped back up about Nintendo and the Switch and revising the hardware, doing a Switch Mini, doing a new Nintendo Switch, an upgraded Nintendo Switch. That conversation, I think, will be had until the end of time, until Nintendo either does upgrade the Nintendo Switch or just moves on from it completely with their next round of hardware. So part of what this all makes me think is, with these conversations and this stuff happening from Sony and Microsoft and a little bit from Nintendo, even though the Switch is way too new to be thinking about it, are we staring down the barrel, essentially, of the next generation of hardware? And while I don't necessarily think that we're that close, I kind of lean towards yes. I mean, clearly, all of the major players are working on stuff behind the scenes to say, hey, we've got physical hardware coming. We're not moving to cloud-based or streaming-based models just yet. That is a conversation and a thought that some people have. Yves Guillemot from Ubisoft recently said, I think right before E3, that he envisions after the next round of consoles, maybe we'll be in all streaming. I don't really think that's true. But that's what he said. And if anything, it just seems like with Sony and Microsoft essentially confirming physical hardware, probably disc-based gaming consoles for another round after this current round. That means that we're at least staying physical for the next couple of years, and that does make me happy. But suddenly it's like, man, are we really ready for new hardware already? And the good news is, whatever Microsoft and Sony are doing are probably not going to happen anytime before, gosh, 2021? I hope we're at least 2021, 3 years away. Could be sooner, you never know. I mean, honestly, the PS5 conversation's been going for a little bit, you guys. So I wouldn't be shocked if it happened in 2020. There were rumors as early as 2019, next year, for the PlayStation 5. I still just don't believe that. That does not make sense. And the whole recent conversation about the PlayStation 5 and the last phase of the PS4, but then also clarifying, that to me tells me that it is not next year. I would think 2020 at the earliest, but I want to hope 2021 for both consoles. So that puts us 3 years from now. That would also give us essentially an 8-ish year life cycle for the PS4 and the Xbox One. Pretty interesting, because that would make it longer than like the PS2 and the Xbox. Not quite as long as the PS3 and the Xbox 360, but still pretty long in the tooth. Typically, generations don't last necessarily that long. I think that 5, 6, 7 year mark is usually pretty good. Of course, last gen, the 7th generation, was a little bit of an anomaly with how long that actually lasted. I have to say, thinking about a new Xbox and a new PlayStation console in the next couple of years, 2020, 21, 22, or what have you, you know, it does get me a little bit excited, because new hardware is always exciting. What's tricky is the fact that, and maybe I'm alone in this, but I really feel like the PS4 and the Xbox One just aren't that old. They don't feel that old to me. They don't feel like consoles that we need to move away from, and that the industry is pushing away from, and developers are pushing away from, and that we're all clamoring for new hardware and for another advanced step in graphics and technology and hardware capability and all this kind of stuff. I mean, that is an exciting aspect of moving to new hardware for sure. I do like that stuff as well, but I don't think any of us are really craving it. When it comes to Sony, of course, there is the argument that, and I made this on that video I referenced earlier, the thing about the PlayStation is that right now the PlayStation 4 is selling so well. Sony and the PS4 are basically unstoppable. And there could be a case to be made that releasing a new PlayStation and putting all that time and money and R&D and marketing costs into launching a new console, which is like the most insanely expensive endeavor any company could have to go through. Why do that when you might potentially cannibalize your really successful PS4 market? Of course, if it turned out to be backwards compatible, that is kind of a good way to be sort of a win-win situation for Sony. They're kind of appeasing all the different fronts there. And that would be kind of true, but I don't know that I would still see them doing that. I feel like that PS5 has got to be 2021 or later. Of course, Xbox not doing too hot right now in terms of console sales. And I think that's why Phil Spencer was so outward in saying, hey, we're not done. We love the Xbox brand. A new one's coming soon. Hey, it's called the Scarlet. We've got all these studios. And I'm telling you guys, all of those studios, the Ninja Theory, the Playground Games, the initiative that they created internally, that is all for the next Xbox. That is all for Scarlet. I would put all of my money on that. That's 99% sure, you guys. Don't anyone get excited about that and think, oh, this is how they're going to fix the Xbox One. No, they're not going to fix the Xbox One. I love the console, but it's just not going anywhere. I think that Microsoft knows they need to move on with it. Similar to how Nintendo had to move on from the Wii U, even though clearly the Wii U was the bigger sales disaster. Don't get me wrong there. But I think it's kind of similar. We're like, the Xbox One has done okay, but it doesn't compare to the PS4. The Switch has all the momentum that the Xbox One does not have right now. And I think that they're like, okay, we have to pull essentially on Nintendo, and we're going to pull our resources from our current console. We're going to start putting all our resources into the next one. We might have a slow 2 or 3 years, but it's going to all be worth it when we come out of the gate and just bang it out with an incredible Xbox 2, whatever that Scarlet turns out to be. And that, I think, very much is borrowing from Nintendo's Switch model, where Nintendo just had the most incredible comeback in the amazing about-face coming from the Wii U to the Switch by doing that same thing. Abandoning the Wii U, moving on internally, accepting a slow 2 years so that they can launch the next console with the most successful way they could have done it. And I think Microsoft might be doing the same thing. So all of those companies are going to be supporting the Scarlet, the next Xbox, around launch. And I think same goes for Halo Infinite, by the way. I think Halo is going to be a launch title. They want Halo to be the Breath of the Wild for the Xbox. Breath of the Wild was the ultimate pinnacle Nintendo experience to launch a brand new console with, and look at how successful that was for Nintendo as a company and the Switch as a console. Microsoft is doing the same thing with Halo. Mark my words, that's what's going to happen. Now, of course, we have to talk about Nintendo. I got to talk about my boys Nintendo and the Switch, and how it fits into this idea of the next generation finally starting to pick up a little steam behind the scenes, and we're suddenly starting to feel like, man, it could become a reality in another 2 or 3 years, even though the Xbox and PlayStation feel kind of new, and the Switch really is new. New stuff is coming soon. But what about the Switch? How does that fit in? And again, that video I made about the Switch a couple months ago touches a lot on kind of how maybe they did or did not start the new generation. But if we do see an Xbox Scarlet and a PlayStation 5 in 2 or 3 years, what does Nintendo need to do? What do they do with the Switch? What do they do as a company? How do they respond to that? And there definitely could be a scenario, or even a lot of beliefs that you guys would believe out there, where Nintendo doesn't respond. Or maybe they don't even need to respond. If the Switch continues to be so crazy successful, I don't care what the headlines and the stupid stocks say. Come on, man. The Switch is insanely successful, and it is still currently successful. And it's probably only going to continue that. And so if we get to 2021 and it's time for that new Xbox and PlayStation, what does Nintendo do with their Switch? Well, maybe, like I said, they do nothing and they're just like, hey, we don't need to change anything. The Switch is doing fine. But I don't really think that's the case. If the next Sony and Microsoft consoles come like 2019 or 2020, it might be a little bit trickier. I might then believe Nintendo would have probably no answer or just like a mini upgrade answer to the Switch, and that's it. But if we hit 2021 or later territory for the PS5 and the Xbox Scarlet, I mean, as weird as it may sound to think about right now when we're only a year and a half into the Switch's life, at that point, that'll be what? We're coming up on 4, 5 years or so for the Switch at that time. I think Nintendo might be moving on from the Switch around that time. And I know it might seem crazy. Who knows what the sales situation will be in 2021 for the Switch? Will it have passed 100 million units? Will it be sitting still very, very high and pretty at 70 or 80 million units? That's more my guess, is probably the 70 or 80 million range. And is the momentum still going, or will it have slowed down to a snail's pace? And based on what's happening there, based on what Nintendo's working on behind the scenes, which we know they're always working on something, I expect them to have an answer. Like, it's strange that Nintendo and the Switch are in a weird position. That's why I made that video that I've already referenced. Because they started the 8th gen with the Wii U, and within the next year, Sony and Microsoft followed suit. And so for a couple of years, whatever, 3, 4 years, 5 years, 4 years, I can't math. 2012 to what, 2017. So 5 years, if I can do numbers, that the Wii U operated, and 4 of those years, the Xbox and the PlayStation operated alongside of it from 2013 to 2017. And so you have those consoles and Nintendo's Wii U controlling that Nintendo market for that period of time. Then the Switch comes out and the Wii U dies, while still the same 8th gen PS4 and Xbox One continue to go. And that's what we're looking at now. And so it's weird how I think that we're going to ultimately see is that Nintendo just split the generation down the middle. First couple of years was the Wii U. Last couple of years was the Switch, and by the time Sony and Microsoft are ready to reset in a few years, I think Nintendo is going to be ready to reset right along with them, maybe, and we just get everyone moving in tandem again for the first time in a while. And that could kind of be how Nintendo and the Switch fits into it. Very hard to predict. You never know. Nintendo does crazy things. Maybe they do release a 3DS successor, and as the Switch phase, they let that thing carry them for a while, and then they end up releasing the successor to the Switch a few years after the PS5 and the Xbox Scarlet. I mean, maybe they do that. It's really hard to tell, and I think that the business of the Switch and how successful it continues to be, and if and when it slows down, is going to probably really dictate what happens there, which, to be fair, is as it should. And it's that same mentality that makes me think the more the PS4 continues to sell, the more Sony doesn't have a reason to move on from it onto the PS5. So it's tricky. I guess I don't want to say it's messy. It's just tricky. I'll just stick with that. It's a very interesting, tricky scenario. It is exciting, but it's also strange. I mean, I can't help but be excited about the idea of new hardware. So I guess the next couple of years are gonna help us understand what's going on. But Microsoft is talking about their next Xbox, man, which means Sony is going to be doing the same thing, and Nintendo, in some weird Nintendo kind of way, is also going to be planning their own type of response. I mean, they're all competitors in this same market. They pay attention to what each other does. Even Nintendo, that marches to the beat of their own drum, trust me, they're paying attention to Sony and Microsoft, just like those guys are paying attention to Nintendo. So come 2021, who knows what we might see. So that is it for me today on this crazy next generation topic, and how does Nintendo fit in, and what's happening with the Scarlet. Really crazy stuff, but like I said, pretty exciting to me. So what do you guys think about this? Do you feel like we're truly staring down the barrel of the next generation? Do you think it's creeping up on us? What do you think about the Xbox Scarlet and the PlayStation 5 talk? How do you think Nintendo will respond based on when those consoles might launch? What do you think is going to happen? The next generation, suddenly we're starting to think about it. At least I'm starting to think about it, hence this probably 20-minute long video I've made discussing the topic. So share your thoughts about this below. I always love hearing from you guys. All opinions are welcome here. That is it for me. Thanks as always for tuning in. This is Rob of Ro2R Review, and I'll catch you guys next time on another video.